Welcome everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for joining us for another ENS Office Hours space. I am Sadaf or Sadaf.eth, your host. And next to me here, of course, we have Vincent, my colleague and friend, community manager at ENS Labs. How are you doing, Vincent?
Doing well. GM, everybody, GM.
GM. So joining us today, we have two very cool and innovational projects, 3num and Skiff, who are both building on and with ENS. We'll kick off the space with 3num, who is building a service offering Web3 mobile numbers that securely bridge over 5 billion users to the amazing world of Web3. And with us from 3num, we have founder Chris Boscalo. How are you doing, Chris? Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having us, and GM, everyone.
GMs all around. Why don't we just dive right in here if you're okay with that?
Yeah.
So I would love to hear if you wouldn't mind starting us off with just a kind of a brief overview for anybody that might be new to 3num. Can you tell us a little bit about when it was founded, what the original concept for it was, where it kind of came from, and what kind of problems does 3num solve?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me first of all, just thank you so much for having us. I love talking about ENS and the future of identity. I also, just before I jump into 3num, want to say I'm super honored to be on sharing a stage with Skiff. I think it's really interesting because our two projects represent the two most popular human digital identifiers in use today. Many people may not know this, but there's about 5.5 billion people that use a mobile phone for communication. That's the number one digital identifier used by humans. The second one is at around 4.2 billion users' email addresses. So it's super awesome that these two companies are up here trying to move the world to a more secure version of those digital identities. It's also interesting. The third one is Facebook ID at nearly like 3 billion. And really, like the previous decade, we saw Web2 companies like Facebook really successfully capture and centralize our ability to digitally identify ourselves on the internet. And so I see ENS, in my opinion, I see ENS as being the most promising tech to move us back to a more federated, shared common. So I'm going to just start there before I jump into 3num. I'm really excited to be talking about this today. So 3num itself was founded last summer, and our goal was to solve fixed phone numbers against SIM swap attacks. For those of you in the audience that may not be aware, a SIM swap is when an attacker usually uses some form of social engineering to convince the mobile carrier to have your phone number ported to a device that they're in control of. And once they do that, they reset all of your passwords that used to SMS for authentication. And every time I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of people, I always start with, if you're a builder, do not use SMS for authentication. It is very insecure because it's so easily to do the SIM swap via the social engineering. In 2019, I was actually the victim of being SIM swapped, which is why I'm currently building this solution. And the solution to that problem, like having had a background working on digital identity and specifically blockchain-based digital identity, became really clear that the problem today stems from the fact that we have carriers that keep these databases of phone number to device IDs, and it's possible for a human to go change those databases, and that's what SIM swapping is. 3num solves this problem by turning the phone number into a blockchain asset controlled by the private key that the user owns. And then we leverage VoIP technology using that blockchain asset as your digital identifier. So our long-term vision is basically to upgrade the digital identity used by everyone, 5.5 billion people around the world, to make it a blockchain native, using ENS in order to upgrade to like all those legacy telco to an open end-to-end encrypted protocol that uses a more secure digital identity at the root. So that's like my soapbox part of the, I'll try not to do any more soapboxing, I promise.
No, Chris, you are an excellent speaker, so you are welcome to soapbox as much as you'd like. I gotta first address, the beginning half of your statement there. So we are so excited to have both of you guys on. Obviously, both mobile and email are huge uses. So to see people building on and with ENS in that sector is very exciting for all of us. I think that we can all agree that this is something that needs to have more of an open approach to it. Obviously, as you've mentioned, being a victim of SIM swapping it's just devastating. I know quite a few people myself, and it has the capability to really destroy people's lives. So it is a huge problem. I love that you guys are approaching this so openly. So we're really excited to have you on, both of you guys, really. So when did ENS first come onto the team's radar at Freenom?
Yeah, sure. Like for me as a founder, I actually registered my first ENS in around actually a month before I got SIM swapped. I think that's just a coincidence because I found out later that my particular SIM swapping happened as a result of a T-Mobile breach, not a targeted attack. But so I personally have been, although I've given up that domain, I have a new domain now, but been an ENS holder for a while. As a team, though, we actually launched in the summer. Our first project was we built and submitted a pull request to Signal to enable ENS lookups as an alternative Signal username. Unfortunately, Signal, which is itself a very centralized, organization and service, awesome. Like I still love Signal as an end-to-end encrypted platform. It's the technology is superb, but they didn't accept our pull request to add ENS as the username of choice for Signals. But that was our first like actually writing code to make ENS solve a real world problem.
Well, that's we as we're growing, we will always face these kind of road bumps and things like that. But we appreciate you carrying on with it and sticking to ENS and really kind of working things out. Now, obviously, since then a lot has changed. You guys have a really incredible ENS integration. Can you kind of provide us with some of the details about that integration and how it enhances the user experience for people that are using 3num?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just launched our beta last week called 3num Messenger. It's a two-way messenger. Um, Within that messaging experience, you can identify anybody via their phone number, obviously, because that's what we're securing. But also, you can message anyone if you know their ENS. And the way we think about this is the way most people use their phone numbers today is they tend to be like the one identifier they give out to people, but nobody ever memorizes it. They just use it to make the initial connection, and then they have either a pet name or another name that they usually refer you to as. And so for us, that's how we envision people will use this. But once they're in the messaging experience, they're going to be using like more friendly names, and like in my case, I've fully doxed myself, so it's my first name, last name. But within the messaging experience, that's how we are leveraging ENS. And then on top of that, we don't have this done yet, but we're working on the ability to quote unquote name your number. So when we have the ability to do voice messaging back to legacy numbers, which our product doesn't support today, you can imagine you'll call somebody and on their caller ID, they'll see your ENS name. That's what we're envisioning for our future integration.
Wow, that is super exciting. This is actually something that I tweeted about a few months ago, where I was talking about how people don't remember each other's phone numbers anymore. It's not like it was 15 years ago. Things have just become so much simpler, and so people don't feel the need to spend time memorizing each other's phone numbers. But that is such an essential thing. it's your line of communication with the world, really. So it's very cool to hear that you guys are going to be using ENS to name these phone numbers. That's really exciting. So is this something where we may potentially see, ENS subnames coming into the picture as well? Obviously, the name wrapper has just come out, so people have been issuing out subnames for each other. They can stand alone as their own NFTs. Is that something that's on your radar that you guys have thought about, or maybe have in the pipeline for the future?
A couple different avenues to the answer to this question. Like anybody can set up their own subname and use it within our product, just like you could in any product that's integrated with ENS. So like, for example, my ENS name, if you want to message me, is chris.boscolo.eth. And then in addition to that, though, we are, for 3num users, we have the 3num.eth domain, which will allow people to create a subname under that, to name, if they don't currently have an ENS, they'll be able to create one. And for that, we'll be using CCIP, so there'll be no on-chain transaction costs or anything like that. For the audience, if you've ever used Coinbase ID, like name.cb.id, or there may be some other popular ones out there that I may not be aware of, but what CCIP gives us is the ability to do a lookup and have the domain name point you back to a Web2 server that gives you an answer that the smart contract can then verify is the right answer before serving it back to the client. So that will give us a way to give people 3num specific ENS name if they don't already have an ENS name. And then, one last thing on the wrappers. We don't have anything leveraging name wrapping yet, and we haven't identified a use case for anything there, but definitely on our radar of things we're keeping track of.
So I was going to ask real quick, so the issuance of a subname off of 3num would kind of be soul bound, I guess, or you guys would control that. So like if somebody switched a phone number, then like if you could register like, phone number dot 3num dot eth, and that would work.
Yeah. So great question. And we have kind of an announcement we're going to drop at the very end of this, targeting specifically the phone number part. But what our 3num.eth domain will be for is just usernames. So the name itself, so under the hood, let me take a step back. Under the hood, we're still dealing with wallet addresses. So when you mint a 3num, you're minting an NFT and it's owned by a very specific wallet, right? That wallet is ultimately the identifier we use for messaging. And so if you have an ENS pointed to that same wallet, you can look it up either by ENS name or by the wallet address natively. So for users within the product that don't have an ENS yet, they can create one, but it's using CCIP, so we're not actually doing anything on chain. And in that case, that particular ENS would be, I don't like to use the word soulbound because it would be tied to their NFT, which they control. They could transfer ownership of that, and it would follow that basically.
That makes perfect sense. And to start out, obviously, that works. And if you ever need any ideas or anything for use cases for name wrapper, of course, ENS Labs would be happy to collaborate. And I'm sure that the community can come up with some use cases as they always do. So I want to kind of like shift into the security and privacy aspect of things, because that's going to be a huge topic at hand when we're talking about dealing especially with CCIP and just anything off chain. So are there any additional like security or privacy considerations for messaging sent with 3num that our community should know about?
Absolutely. First off, the DNA of our team is we have spent some time working on digital identity back sort of in the 2017 through 19 timeframe, very focused on how do we build technology that gives agency to people over the attributes about them and how those attributes are disclosed to others. So in our, to boil it down into like simple terms, your public name or your public phone number is just a way to have everyone in the world be able to look in one place to figure out what public key to start doing encryption with. And then that public key is used to build the privacy story, or those public keys. There could be many of them. And so with that background, the messaging itself in the 3num world, we built the Web3 part of the messaging on top of a protocol called XMTP, which I'm sure many people in this community should know about. So all messages sent between any two Web3 addresses is end-to-end encrypted between those two parties. Our solution, what we're trying to do is take that phone number and make it Web3 native, but we recognize that 5.5 billion people are in the world using it over legacy telephone equipment. We believe that if we can give people the tools to take that identifier and use it securely when possible, but fall back to the quote unquote insecure way to actually communicate with the part of the world that hasn't upgraded to Web3 yet, that's really important. Basically meeting users where they're at. And so we have a gateway so that if you send a message to a phone number that isn't Web3 native, it goes over that gateway. And on the other side of the gateway, it is legacy SMS, non-encrypted. So that's part of, we believe that rather than like abandoning the world to the legacy unencrypted, we want to create a path where they can seamlessly enter the world of an encrypted end-to-end messenger. Kind of a long answer, but I think the context is really important.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I know that you have a computer securities background, so it's great to have someone, that is really focused on these things, leading such a massive project. So, and in terms, because I know that you mentioned already end-to-end encryption, in terms of, let's say, messaging with from a wallet to a phone, are there any differences there as far as privacy, data protection goes?
So within our user experience, I kind of mentioned that when you talk end-to-end to another Web3 address, it's end-to-end encrypted, and then over that gateway, it's unencrypted. We took an iMessage approach to the UX. I don't know how many people on the call have an iPhone, but when you message somebody over SMS on your iPhone, you have the green bubbles. And when you message somebody that has iMessage, you get the blue bubbles. We've taken that paradigm and brought it into our app. So when you message somebody and it's end-to-end encrypted, you get purple bubbles. And if you message somebody using their phone number that's going over that insecure gateway, you get the green bubbles to let you know that that particular message is not protected and then encrypted. And so that gives you visually some context of what you're doing. I believe that in this journey of getting people to use secure messaging and use secure technology in general, it's really incumbent on the builders to build user experiences that delivers this capability with the right defaults, with the right choices, so that users don't have to be experts in security and technology to gain the benefits. And that's the approach we're trying to take.
I could not agree more. I think simplifying it for the broader world is so important. And of course, on-ramping, onboarding to Web3 has been such a large obstacle for not just ENS, but for everyone that's building in this space. So kind of making that as easy as possible for people and making sure that it feels familiar enough for them to be able to do it on their own and learn from each other is incredibly important. So as far as it goes with new features, new functionalities as opposed to traditional messaging apps, and I know that you mentioned already that the bubbles for messaging will be different colors, which is very, very cool. That's a great idea. Are there any other features and functionalities that kind of differ from the traditional messaging apps? Okay, so Chris, if you wouldn't mind, we can kind of just pick back up where we left off. And for anyone that's just joining us, I'll kind of set the scene again. So we are talking with 3num right now, which is a wonderful, very innovational company. And they were just telling us about how their messaging app is going to be somewhat different from a traditional messaging app, and what the different functionalities and features are compared to some of those older methods.
Yeah, one of the questions is how does this differ from traditional messaging apps? And one of the things I wanted to mention, I said this a little bit earlier, but we built on top of XMTP, which is itself a wallet-based messaging layer. So if you have an EVM wallet address, you can use XMTP. The cool thing about building on XMTP is it's a pretty diverse ecosystem of builders, which means you can come in with 3num using the 3num app, and your conversations run on XMTP with your wallet address being the identifiers. You could actually switch and use another like Lenster if you want and do the same, or there's a couple other apps that are available. That's the beauty of that is there's a bunch of people building towards a common goal of having that protocol carry very Web3 ideas with it. So you can imagine some of the more obvious ideas are being able to message somebody directly to the Web3 address and just send them money if you want, or crypto if you want, or an NFT if you want. Some other really interesting ideas are token-gated group chats based on maybe NFT ownership. Everything, if you can imagine, everything that's composable in Web3, you get to build on in this community. That said, we're in early days. So, the capabilities today are pretty nascent. We're just getting started. But I'm really looking forward to both what we build as well as what others build on that protocol that we can take advantage of. One of the things I'll talk specifically about, because it is a problem related to what we're doing, is spam and spam prevention. And so, as I said, for us, the spam problem is actually twofold. One is just within the Web3 ecosystem, because it's a peer-to-peer open network, like any other peer-to-peer open network, you have spam as a problem. In that, what I mean by that is anybody can try to contact anybody else over that network. The awesome thing about building on sort of Web3 substrate is we have a lot at our disposal to address the spam problem. For example, during the user experience, we aren't here yet, but imagine a user experience where instead of just directly having a conversation show up in your inbox, there is an invitation step involved, and that invitation comes with it a bunch of, I'll say, credentials or attributes of the person making it. For example, what shapes they hold, or whatever other NFT assets they might hold. You immediately get a sense of who's messaging you versus an address that just got created, has no transaction history at all, and you don't know who it is. That's sort of the spam by making sure that it's plausibly realistic that the person messaging you has a legitimate history on their address. There are other interesting things we can do also with which, let's say you're a more popular person or you get a lot of requests and you just have to have a better filtering mechanism. One idea is I don't know if we'll implement this or not, but one potential is, you ante up some amount of token that maybe you designate that it'll go to charity if if the person elects to ignore it, but you might leverage that to say, hey, I want to ante up some amount of crypto to start a conversation with this very famous person, And I want them to know I'm legitimate by the fact that I did this, knowing that the person could just direct it all to charity or possibly give it back if it's legitimate. There's some really interesting things we can do with spam on that front. But the second half of the spam problem for us is because we are dealing with the SMS network. On the other half of that, we need to do, in addition to the cool things we can do with Web3 spam prevention, we also want to solve the old SMS spam prevention or spam problem, because today that is probably the number one thing people complain about when it comes to SMS messaging. And so for our gateway side of it, just the fact that the way we're architected with a gateway gives us, I know this sounds crazy, but at least gives us the position in the network to do something about it, as opposed to when you get a mobile number through a carrier, you are 100% tied into what that carrier decides to do for spam prevention, which is pretty much nothing. So with this architecture and the way that we're developing the gateway protocol, you can plug in different spam prevention tech, either be it AI-based or other forms of on-the-fly learning of what could or could not be legitimate numbers, to help prevent that SMS spam from landing at your inbox. The other side of that is the other person that's sending that SMS. A form of spam prevention that we can do is sending them back a response saying, hey, the person you're trying to reach has a spam filter turned on, and it could be as simple as solve this math problem to get through to prevent bots, but it might be, something like go to a website and prove you're human, or again, using that same Web3 tech ideas, maybe posting some amount of crypto again through the website or whatever. But the important thing is we now have the tools. We're in a position to actually solve spam, as opposed to just what's happening today, which is everybody's just at the mercy of spam hitting their inbox.
So this is really exciting. I'm happy that you brought up spam. I'm sure that Skip has a lot of thoughts on this as well. But I often receive text messages with just odd links, and it's terrifying. And I think about the older or the younger generation that may not be so privy to understanding what the real life repercussions of clicking on an odd link could be. So it's great to hear that you guys are really focused in on this, and to add to that, if one was using their ENS name throughout all this, then that could also work as a different form of verification that this person is real, they're legitimate. You can go into their records, find out what NFTs they're collecting, what community they're a part of. So that really kind of works very well hand in hand with ENS, I think.
I'm so glad you said that, and I couldn't agree more. One really interesting thing, and it's ironically related to user experience less than technology, but one of the interesting things about just even Twitter is that the name that is most prominent is the name that they allow any user to type in without any, like you can just change it on a whim. The awesome thing about ENS is if you make that the prominent identifier that people see, you can't forge an ENS. It either is or isn't that person's ENS address. And so it's actually, I say that because it's both a technology problem, but it's also a user experience problem. We need to make sure that we put the ENS in a prominent space of identifying the user, as opposed to, just sort of like an also known as part of the user experience. And then one last thing I'll say about that, and this is specific to 3num, there's also, in our case, it is an NFT, and we do actually mint an on-chain PFP as part of that. So along with the ENS name, you can have a PFP associated with it, or if you just have your PFP set in your ENS records, you can make it an on-chain asset. And the challenge there is, again, you can technically set your ENS profile to just be an HTTP link, in which case it would be very easy to forge. But a user or a client could elect to be a little bit more stringent and say, you know what, we're only going to allow NFTs as PFPs so that you can have some form of visual, like PFP visual identifier along with the name to to help really form the identity of who you're talking to.
So real quick on that, I had a question, I guess. So then if you're able to verify it's somebody's ENS name, not just owned, but are you using like the ownership wallet, or are you requiring them to have set the primary? Because, when you set the primary, the wallet it's pointed to, that address has to go ahead and sign a transaction to let it be able to be used as the primary.
Yeah.
So is that kind of part of the check and balance you have for identifying the names?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 3num's case, in our client case, we let you set your name in your profile, and we communicate that over the protocol to the other party. And then in our client, we take that name, we do a forward lookup on it to make sure the addresses match what the person you're messaging. So we don't technically have to do the reverse lookup to find out if the wallet owner is the ENS owner. But it does require an in-band protocol sending of the identity that you want to be using with the other party. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So it verifies, because with ENS names, you could, if it uses the forwarded address, anybody can put any address that the name arrives to. But if you have some type of like signature to where they have to sign something, then yeah, I think that works as well.
Yeah. So just let me restate what I said, just because I think it's really important. When you set your profile to a name, we send that over to the other party. So imagine I'm sending you a message. I will send you that my name is chris.boscolo.eth. If your client, when you're using 3num, it will do a forward lookup on chris.boscolo.eth and make sure that the address that gets returned is the one you're talking to in that conversation. And if it doesn't match, then we tell you that somebody's trying to forge. They're not, well, we don't say that. We just throw it up as an error and you don't see it. But the validation, we don't rely on reverse lookups for the reasons you just said.
I think that makes a lot of sense there. And something that you had mentioned just a little bit ago was token gating, and my ENS brain immediately goes to, oh wow, well ENS has great ways that you can token gate things. So I'm thinking to myself, this could be the perfect use case for name wrapper and creating your own sub communities for certain use cases, for let's say certain group chats or something of that sort. Could be a great way to implement the name wrapper into an amazing product like 3num. Just to throw some ideas out there.
I love it.
So we have gone through all of the really cool features and functionalities that are added. I'm curious to know, are there any big limitations or capability issues that you guys have run into as far as different Web3 protocols or networks that anybody that's using 3num or interested in it should know about, or that maybe someone might have an idea in solving?
I mean, without going on a rant, the number one issue is just wallet experience. We as builders absolutely need to simplify the wallet experience for people, especially on mobile. It is, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but it's just super cumbersome. And so that's not, first and foremost, has nothing to do with ENS or 3num specifically, but just as a general like Web3 thing. We are very interested in solving that problem, and we're looking at different approaches to that. I think I mentioned Farcaster earlier. I think they did a fabulous job with their embedded wallet approach to just take out the friction from onboarding people, even though the app they're using is controlling a wallet address. I think that's a really smart approach. The other thing, it's not so much a deficiency or anything, but I said this before, we're just in early days. So over the protocols themselves, like XMTP. There's no group messaging yet, for example, but it's coming. And so it's more just time to get those features implemented more than just deficiencies in the protocols themselves.
And just kind of an aside question here. Now I know that we already spoke about iOS and Apple, but is this a product that would be released for Android users as well? Because that's usually the first question that we get back from the community about things.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. Actually, so our beta is web only right now. We are in the process of releasing the mobile apps, and they will go out on both iOS and Android when we release those.
Okay, that is excellent to hear. So just one more kind of question for you here, and I know that you mentioned there was going to be an announcement towards the end. So are there any new features or new functionalities that the ENS community can keep their eye out for?
Yeah, so I did kind of mention we're going to be announcing something today. We are today. I just want to throw this out to the community. We're announcing an ENS subdomain called e164.eth. And what e164.eth will let you do is you'll be able to register a phone number on that domain using, any 3num user will already show up as a name on E164. But what this will let users do is turn their existing phone number into ENS name that is basically your phone number.e164.eth. And just the reason it's E164 is the protocol that defines globally how numbers are routed around the world. So for example, my phone number is +1 and then some 10-digit code because I'm in the United States. Other countries have other numbers. So that what defines all of those numbers is E164. And so what we're releasing is, or what we're announcing, we haven't released this yet. It'll go out most likely next week, but is the ability, first and foremost, anybody that mints a 3num NFT, you'll automatically be able to look up the numbers using that domain name. So it just comes for free as part of minting that. And again, that service is a CCIP-based service. It'll be operated by the 3num DAO. Its purpose is to be a public good that will allow you to register your phone number and use the wallet associated with it in lieu of SMS-based authentication. So this is a public good that we want people to be able to, instead of doing SMS auth, we want people to be able to register their number and use the wallet associated with it for all future authentications, which means once the service is up and running, people will be able to build or update their SMS auth infrastructure to use this instead of SMS authentication.
That is super exciting. Wow, I'm really thrilled to hear that you guys are already working on such big projects rolling out. Is there and I know it's so difficult to say from a development standpoint. Is there some sort of a timeline on these things?
So the E164 domain will go live next week, and all 3nums. So I didn't talk too much about the under the hood part of 3num. When you mint a 3num, you're basically minting a brand new phone number. You're not using your existing number. The reason for that is as I mentioned, we send, there's a gateway involved, and we don't yet have the capabilities to let you port your number in to have parity with your existing carrier functionality. So next week, we'll be releasing the ability for that 3num that you mint to be looked up on E164. We're pretty certain on that timeline. The timeline for registration of non-3num based numbers, in other words, if you have just your legacy carrier number and you just want to register it so that you can get the ENS associated with it, that's more likely going to be probably 3 weeks from now.
Okay, wow, you guys are building really quickly.
This is
So
underway. This
that's
is like we've been working on this for a bit, so it's not we're not building it right, as I'm speaking these words.
well, either way, I mean, to see all the progress that you guys have made is really an incredible thing. I would love to just have you on in the future again so that we can kind of go over some of the updates as they're rolling out if that's something that you and your team would be interested in.
Absolutely, always love. I mean, anything to again, we're committed to um, moving the world to Web3 tech because we believe it gives people agency over their identity and privacy when they want it, um, their control, right? And so for us, ENS is a foundation for that, and I'm always willing to come and be a mouthpiece for preaching, the goodness of ENS for the world.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I
Thank
really
you.
do appreciate you making time for this, and sorry again about the initial rug there. We'll make sure that the word is still spread about everything. And again, like we're happy that you had the time to join us today. We do. Other than that, I want to thank Chris and 3num again for coming up and joining us for today's space. It was so cool to hear about the project that you guys are working on. I'm really, really excited to see how things roll out. And hopefully, we can kind of work together on deeper ENS integrations in the future. What you guys are doing is obviously very needed. It's super innovational. And I think that the ENS community is going to be really excited about it. If you guys would like to check them out, we have the 3num page up here. Make sure that you guys go follow them. Make sure you follow Chris for all of their updates and everything. And beyond that, Vincent, I think we could probably close out and have Skiff join us maybe next week if they're available.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good plan.
So everyone have a wonderful week, and we will see you again here next weekend.